Welcome to Movie Oubliette, the film review podcast for movies that most people have mercifully forgotten.
I'm Dan.
And I'm Conrad, and in each episode, we drag a forsaken film out of the oubliette,
discuss it and judge it to decide whether it should be set free
or whether it should be thrown back and consigned to oblivion forever.
We review the films others tend to forget. Come with us and open up the movie oubliette.
Hello and welcome to Movie Oubliette, the transcontinental podcast for forgotten fantastical films, with me, Conrad, nibbling on a scone in Cambridge, UK.
And me, Dan, munching on a South Melbourne dim sum in Melbourne, Australia.
We focus on sci-fi, horror and fantasy because Dan and I love investigating derelict spacecraft, strange noises in the middle of the night, and unicorns in wooded glades.
Love me some unicorns.
Always. How are you today, Dan?
I'm very well, very well. It's a good time to record at 1 a.m. in the morning.
I am really sorry about the time slot this time. We have a special guest today and she is in New York. So, yes, interesting in terms of scheduling.
It is very interesting.
But I'm sure you will get your revenge when we get a New Zealand actor or director on.
Fingers crossed. So, anything in the mailbag today, Conrad?
Well, we've been having some lovely comments on our YouTube channel. In case you don't know, I animate little excerpts from the podcast. They're well worth having a look if you haven't followed us on YouTube. And we had a comment from Michael Pilola. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. But he just wanted to say that I can't get your opening theme out of my head, and I've been belting it out as loud as I can at random times, much to the chagrin of my wife and kids.
That's what we're hoping for.
Yeah, that's what we were shooting for right from the beginning. Earworm that irritates everybody else in the house.
I don't have anything in the mailbag, but I do want to mention that I think 2 episodes ago, when I was trying to desperately find H20, I also found another movie on my journey, Dead Calm, which I have here, which is in the oubliette. We might visit later on. And I also found this show, which is called The Dead Set, which we won't cover because it's a TV show, but it's by the creator of Black Mirror, so Charlie Brooker.
Yes, it's a zombie apocalypse in the Big Brother house, if you've ever watched Big Brother.
That sounds right up my alley.
Yeah, if anybody in the UK is interested in watching it, I believe it's just been added to Netflix.
Any more comments or feedback?
Well, just as usual, we always get lovely comments from Serge of Cold Crash Pictures.
Hey, Serge.
Hey, Serge. Yeah, on our Halloween episode on YouTube, he said, I want your jump scare stinger as my ringtone.
Oh, it's so great.
I think it would get old pretty quick.
Just love those jump scares in H20.
Yes, indeed we do. So hopefully you can get to the oubliette without a jump scare today to pull out a film for us to discuss.
Okay, just one moment. All right, I'm over by the oubliette. Wow, it's some sort of formal event down here.
Oh, it's black tie.
Okay.
I myself hate marriages.
Okay, I'm back. And the movie today that we will be taking a look at is from 2011, and it's called Melancholia. It's a drama sci-fi directed and written by Lars von Trier, who is he Danish?
He is.
Danish director. So, and it's starring Kirsten Dunst, Charlotte Gainsbourg, Alexander Skarsgård, Stellan Skarsgård, his father.
Yes.
John Hurt, and Kiefer Sutherland, Udo Kier, and Charlotte Rampling.
This is a very different film for us. This is quite a serious film, I would say.
Yes, it's a very high art, some might say pretentious film. So Melancholia centers around 2 sisters, Justine and Claire. Justine suffering from crippling depression, split into 2 acts. The first follows Justine at her wedding, trying to hold it together whilst mentally falling apart, and in doing so exposing the cracks in her family as they deal with her torment. The second act follows Claire, Justine's sister, dealing with the aftermath of the failed wedding, taking care of her sister, but also having to come to grips with a planet colliding with Earth and thus causing the end of the world.
Wow.
So essentially, the movie covers depression, loneliness, and isolation, and the Earth's existence as we know it. Just a jolly romp, really.
Brace yourself for what is probably going to be our most serious discussion ever.
Lots to talk about.
Yes, a lot to talk about. And excitingly, we have a special guest to discuss this movie with. In fact, a special guest who chose this movie to discuss. So, yes, can't wait to introduce her and start chatting.
Be right back.
Welcome back, and we have a very special guest joining us today, a wonderful actor whose more than 50 credits include everything from hit TV series such as Days of Our Lives, The Outer Limits and White Collar, films such as Weekend at Bernie's, and even most recently, voice work on the blockbusting AAA game Red Dead Redemption 2. But she's probably best loved among fans of our favourite genres for her roles as the Uzi-toting apocalypse survivor Reggie in Night of the Comet, and the girl from the trailer next door, Maggie, in The Last Starfighter. I'm very excited to welcome to Movie Oubliette, Catherine Mary Stewart. Hooray!
Hey.
Woo! I'm so happy to be here. I feel like I'm spreading myself all over the world. I love it.
Well, it's very exciting to have you here because both The Last Starfighter and Night of the Comet are personal favourites and sci-fi cult classics that we're hoping to cover at some point in the future. So,
Oh, cool. Very good. And you know that both of them are either being remade or a sequel is being done to them.
really?
Theoretically. That's in the news these days, yeah. The Last Starfighter is Jonathan Betchwell, who wrote the original script, has finally gotten the rights to it. There was a big challenge over that for a long, long time. And so he is now trying to do a sequel, I believe, and I'm hoping, and I've got my fingers crossed because Lance Guest and I would love to participate in that.
Yeah, excited to see what might have happened to yourself and Lance after you jetted off to the stars together at the end of The Last Starfighter.
No, I'm thinking we've got some offspring happening somewhere. So we'll see what happens with that. With any luck. If we're healthy young man and woman, we should. By now.
Definitely, yeah. No beta units either.
That's right. Keep beta units at bay. And also, Night of the Comet is being remade, I think, by a writer named Roxanne Benjamin. I have to say, not as excited with a remake because it's kind of hard to, duplicate that and to translate into today. But we'll see what happens. Sadly, there's some talk of taking the humor out of it, making it more of a, apocalyptic kind of a thing, which I think really makes it unique. But we'll see what happens. It's all very curious.
Exciting.
So speaking of apocalypses, the film that you have chosen for us to talk about today is Lars von Trier's epic apocalyptic science fiction drama Melancholia. And I was wondering if you could kick things off for us by explaining why you picked it.
God knows. I remember the very first time I saw this movie, I was just completely confused through the whole thing because there didn't seem to be any sort of story arc or anything that was particularly linear about it. It starts off with 8 minutes of, these visuals that are ultra slow motion that are just sort of show the apocalypse. It was insane. And I'm like, what the heck is this movie about? And then you jump, to this wedding scene that seems at first to be very fun and light and blah, blah, blah. Carries on from there. But what I remembered the most when I first saw the movie, after all this other stuff is going on, was the very end. And as it turns out, I'm really fascinated by this sort of end of the world apocalyptic theme in movies. And I find myself disappointed in most movies. So many of them portray this absolute chaos on Earth, and everybody has to drink as much as they can or have as much sex as they can because it's going to be the end of the Earth. And so everybody goes crazy, and I was like, this is just an excuse to be hedonistic. I don't know. And never satisfied me. But when I saw the end of this, the visual of the building the teepee, climbing into it, and the three characters holding hands as the Earth literally impacts this other planet, I was just blown away by that. I don't know what it was. I guess I'm just that kind of dark person under this sort of frivolous exterior. I don't know. I just blew me away, sort of metaphorically and physically and psychologically. It's just wild, and the more I watch it, the more I like it. So that's my intro.
It's a very strong intro because this film is very difficult to describe. Dan, you'd seen this movie before, hadn't you? I hadn't.
Yes, I've seen it a few times. Yes.
Ooh. Do you like it?
Yes. No, I do really love it. Lars von Trier, I know why people hate him as a director, and his films are quite self-absorbed. They're very bleak. They're very miserable. I think this one is counted as the second of his depression trilogy.
That's right.
Antichrist being the first one, which is very bleak as well. Yeah, and I think this film especially does touch on depression, literally, with Justine's character being depressed during her wedding and just unable to function as a human being. And then in the second act, when we follow Claire, the depression is kind of personified as a planet, Melancholia, even called Melancholy. And that depression, it's almost like the depression is this planet hurtling towards Earth, and Claire is reacting in the same way that Justine did with her depression, but with the planet, and just being unable to cope and being frantically trying to do stuff, but not really being able to get away. The whole bridge being a symbolism of trying to get away from depression, but not able to cross over and to go on to other things. And in the end, with Justine having dealt with her depression, and the planet almost felt like she accepted her fate and accepted the planet destroying the Earth, whereas Claire was still not accepting it, and even in the end she was crying and could not get to grips, whereas Justine was calm and just let it happen.
Well, yeah.
So I think there's a lot of stuff in there. There's a lot of depth.
Yeah, it's almost like the reversal of character. I think Charlotte Gainsborough was saying that she felt like she and Kirsten Dunst's character were really two sides of one person. But, Claire reacts to this apocalypse basically in the way a normal human being would. And it's so interesting to watch how Kirsten Dunst or Justine, all of a sudden, her life is in control. And apparently with people that are, very, very depressed, when there is some sort of a situation that is catastrophic as this, they calm down. It's like because in their everyday life, they already know that life is a catastrophe. That's why they're depressed. And maybe this is a way she looks at it as see what happens. So you open with this 8-minute visual sequence, which I loved. I just thought it was so beautiful and eerie. And I mean, it's so tangible. You just feel it through your body. This 8 minutes of ultra slow motion visuals of, from the close-up of Kirsten Dunst in the depth of her depression, to birds falling behind her, to it sort of takes you through the whole journey of the movie in the beginning till that last shot of the Earth just sinking into this planet, Melancholia. And I guess Lars von Trier wanted to just kind of get it out of the way so that you knew what was going to happen. It wasn't going to be some mystery. Are they going to live? Are they going to die?
Yeah.
No, they're going to die. That's what's going to happen here. And so you can really sort of pay attention to the rest of the movie, which is interesting.
Yes. As you say, you get this 8 minutes of astonishing slow motion photography that sort of combines a premonition of what is to come, both literally and figuratively. You even see some of the metaphors. So although Claire does run across the golf course outside their lovely stately home, holding her son, trying to escape from the oncoming apocalypse, she's not sinking into the ground as she does in the opening montage. So there are sort of figurative, metaphorical images for what's to come, as well as actual premonitions of what is to come. And then you shift straight into part one, because there's two parts. There's one that's called Justine, there's one that's called Claire, and the Justine focuses on the wedding. And what amazes me about the whole wedding sequence is this stark contrast between this earth-shattering horror that is on the horizon and the empty, futile ceremony of a wedding reception. Not just a wedding, but just the reception, where it's just this very gaudy display of wealth and greed and affluence.
It really throws you off, because it goes from this happy wedding day, and it appears to be perfectly happy as they're trying to drive to the reception at Claire's house, Justine's sister, and they can't get there, and they're late, and they're already in trouble, and you just see her psyche is just slowly being chipped away. And you realize, this is not the healthy person on the happiest day of her life that we thought she was. And then all these crazy characters enter into the story as well, which just kind of adds to her pain, really, because nobody is willing to acknowledge her at all. There's all these scenes where she's, please talk to me, I just need to sit, I just need to take a nap, I just need to do this, and she's not living up to what the expectation is of a newlywed. And so yeah, she just sinks deeper and deeper and deeper into this depression.
Yes, and very much that Justine is expected to perform a very specific role and be happy. And yet you have all these characters around her that are behaving really in quite appalling ways. And the thing that fascinates me about this, I found the whole wedding sequence, it's an hour long, but I found the whole wedding part of the movie almost like a very satirical farce, with all of these characters surrounding her who are more emblematic. They seem to sort of represent a particular viewpoint rather than being fully rounded characters. So you have Kiefer Sutherland as Claire's husband, who's just reminding Justine all the time how much this thing cost, and she better be happy because this thing was expensive. And you have Stellan Skarsgård as Justine's boss, who seems to have only turned up and hijacks his best man speech to try to remind her that she actually has a deadline and he's expecting her to do some work before the end of the night, and has even hired his nephew to follow her around to get this tagline for an ad from her, and threatens to fire him if he doesn't get it. So his whole future career and prosperity hangs in the balance. And you have Justine's mother, who seems to have showed up just to decry weddings in general and say how
Yes,
awful.
Antagonize everybody.
Yeah, because Justine's parents are no longer married, and you've got John Hurt as her father, who seems to be barely even aware of her as an individual. He even mistakenly calls her Betty after he finds himself seated between two Bettys and becomes permanently confused by it for the rest of the evening.
I wasn't sure if that was a joke. I took that as a joke.
I think it is, definitely, yeah. And it just seems to me that she's surrounded by people that are behaving in ways that certainly I would not expect anyone to behave at a wedding. They all seem to have these other agendas. It's a very fraught wedding on the whole.
On the whole, it is. But consider, though, that these characters probably do exist in every wedding.
Right.
But it's not slowed down to this pace and or focused on those specific characters. I would wager a guess that these people, even if they're not vocal about it, they think this way, because it's such a strange, archaic ceremony that, ultimately, what does it mean? And I think that's part of the story that von Trier is trying to tell, too. It's just like the frivolity or the hedonism or whatever you want to call it of life, especially in our Western civilization. It's just like, what's the point? And then we die. And in this case, he chooses to die in just this horribly catastrophic way. I guess maybe that's also something that really draws me to Melancholia specifically. But his mind, it works in such a very unusual, specific way, and really does draw your attention to things that we try to avoid, actually, I think. In the real world, we try to make sure that life is good and everything's great, and to the point where we're blind to seeing, somebody like Justine, who is just suffering. No, I'm sorry. You promised you wouldn't suffer today, which is literally said to her. I can't believe you're ruining the party. And she just sinks deeper and deeper into this depression, which most people have the wherewithal to rise above, I guess. Lars von Trier says that he was sort of exploring his own psyche. He's suffered depression himself, and he sort of wrote this character around his own depression, basically. So it's fascinating, really.
Yeah.
I think as well, the film, another theme of the film is control. So through the first act, Justine is losing control. Her depression is completely overcoming her. And all of these characters, all of her family and relatives are trying to control her. They're trying to make her to be this ideal wife, but she's refusing to do that because she is so overcome by her depression. And in the second act, because of this planet hurtling towards Earth, John and Claire can't handle it because they don't have any control. So John commits suicide, and then Claire tries to get away, and she's just hysterical. And it's that sense of not being in control or having other forces trying to control you. And yeah, it's a really interesting look at characters, and also just the idea of depression being an uncontrollable force that just pushes you down into this hole that you can't get out of.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that the way that the film depicts depression is probably one of the most impressive visualizations and dramatizations of it that I can think of, because this idea that you find it very difficult to enjoy anything, or even, she's in the middle of the most ostentatious and luxurious wedding that you can imagine. The groom is certainly a fine-looking man who seems to be very caring and attentive and concerned about her future and her well-being. And it's Alexander Skarsgård. I mean, you're not going to say no, are you? And you would think that, from a lot of people's perspective, this should be a happy occasion for her, even if it's fraught with the collision of various competing powers in her family, as these things always are. But she cannot enjoy it. She's incapable of enjoying it. And I think representing that as this planet on the horizon that is going to destroy the entire world, this looming presence that always weighs down people that are suffering with depression, that I cannot engage with this event because of this thing that is just dragging me down all the time. And I think the immensity of it really gets across depression in probably the most poignant way that I can think of.
One critique that a lot of people say about Lars von Trier's movies is they are quite misogynistic. So a lot of the time in his movies, the female characters are quite crazy, they're unhinged, they're a bit irrational, and the men are very logical and domineering. And I think there were some parallels in this movie with the Seven Sins as well, a lot of biblical references, and the wedding being, like you said, Catherine, a very hedonistic, just a status event and a formality. But Justine didn't want this. She wanted someone to talk to her on her level, but all the men were either objectifying her or they were saying to her, you know your place, this is what you should be, or they were treating her like a goddess, like her husband, and saying, this is what you want. This is the apple orchard that you wanted. And it is interesting critique to make.
To me, it sort of shines a very negative light on the misogyny. This is what so many men are like. It's, as opposed to a movie that is misogynistic, just because guys are powerful and smarter than women and stronger than women. This shows their flaws, misogynistic flaws, from the husband that treats his wife as a pet, the boss who treats her like an object, to get things done.
Yeah, and the brother-in-law, of course, John, who just keeps reminding her how much all of this is costing. But one thing that struck me when I was watching the film is just how, for a filmmaker who is often critiqued for creating films with a misogynist outlook, how ineffectual all of the male characters are. You have the groom who gives a very underwhelming speech. And then, he seems earnestly interested in taking care of Justine, but he kind of gives up after she doesn't consummate the marriage because she just wants him to connect with her emotionally and comfort her. And then after she goes off and takes advantage of Tim in a sand trap, he just sort of disappears and gives up. And you have her boss, Jack, who, after being told that he's a despicable, power-hungry little man by Justine, tries to break a plate in anger, but he doesn't even manage to do that. He has to go and apologetically collect it and try again.
And he smashes it again. All he wanted to do was break that fucking plate.
Yeah, and even John, the brother-in-law, who gets so angry with Gabby being so rude all the time and says, that's it, I'm going to throw out the mother-in-law. That's sort of misplaced anger, because he's actually angry with Justine for taking a bath and sort of holding everything up. But it's so ineffectual, because even then when he says he's going to throw out the mother-in-law, all he does is take her luggage and throw it outside the front door, at which point the butler just comes out and calmly collects it all and takes it back in again. So all these examples of ineffectual male attempts at control over and over again.
Yeah, it just goes on, but not in a very positive way at all. And I find that interesting too. I find that the female characters ultimately are absolutely the strongest characters, and the most injured character in the whole thing, which is, of course, Kirsten Dunst's character, Justine, is ultimately the strongest character in the end, which is such an interesting exploration,
Yeah.
how she is completely under control.
Yes, I was wondering as I was watching this, just in the back of my mind thinking, Catherine Mary Stewart loves this movie. And I was watching and think, because in terms of the roles that you play and how you are in interviews and in discussions, it's quite a surprise to see such a dark movie.
I like to keep you guys on your toes.
Yeah. But I was just wondering as I was watching it, so we have two halves of the same woman, or two very different women, two very interesting sisters. One who is failing to cope with a futile social event, a social construct, and has to be nursemaided through it by her sister. And then in the flip side, the other one who is failing to get to grips with the end of the world and our ultimate demise that's coming to all of us. And she is nursemaided through it, although a little harshly, it has to be said, by Justine. And I was watching it and thinking, which one of these representations of womanhood does Catherine relate to the most? That's my question for you.
What? Which one's better? I'm kidding. I think I'm a mixture of both of those for sure. I mean, I have not suffered depression. I've been around people who have, so I'm familiar with it. But when I get into a situation where there's a lot of pressure or a lot at stake, I get very focused and my mind goes into survival mode. For sure. I don't get emotional. I don't start freaking out. I mean, however, having said that, if I knew that I was about to implode into another planet, I don't know, I might be a little nervous. So on that level, in that particular scene, I could definitely relate to Claire. But in less apocalyptic situations, let's say, I do sort of hunker down and get very focused and protective and sort of become the mama lion sort of thing. I remember I lived in California for 12 years, and when I was first married, our baby was maybe a year old, probably less than a year old, and there was the big 1994 earthquake there, and the whole house, middle of the night, the whole house just started shaking, and things were falling off the walls, and my husband, who didn't think much of California in the first place, he became paralyzed. He was just like, he didn't know what to do. He freaked out. I got up. I ran to my daughter's bedroom. I found her. She was fine. Picked her up and got into our car to sit outside, so in case the house collapsed on us. But it didn't scare me. I didn't feel scared. I just felt, okay, what do I have to do to protect my family?
Yeah. And the interesting thing between the two characters is, of course, that when it comes to the apocalypse, you could kind of say that Justine has less to lose. Claire has a child. And that's a very different equation, isn't it?
It is a very, very different equation. And it's so interesting also at the end where she was saying, they were talking about, this is the only planet, we're alone in the universe. We're the only ones alive. And Claire says, there might be someplace else, there might be life there isn't. Well, where am I going to take my son? My son needs to go somewhere else. It's like this thing is just coming down on them. I mean, it's there, she's going to, I guess, get into a rocket and go off to some other planet. But that's sort of, I think, instinctually what a mother and I'm sure fathers think is like, how are we going to protect our child?
Yeah.
That is the ultimate challenge,
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the images from the opening that I particularly love is this sort of triptych where they're stood on the lawn in front of that fantastic castle. It's nighttime, and you have Justine on the left, Claire on the right, and in the middle, Leo, Claire's son. And above them in the sky, there is a heavenly body. So you have the sun over Claire, you have Melancholia, of course, over Justine, and over the sun, you have the moon. There is this sense that he is the reason that they're able to come together at the end under that hastily constructed, what is it, a wigwam or
Teepee.
Yeah, it's sort of like a teepee without the covering, or as she called it, the magic cave.
Yes.
So at that point, it was like This'll do it. I don't think they had a lot of time to figure out everything, but
Yeah.
it's too bad they couldn't have been in some screening room like in Night of the Comet, where they played the film, protected from everything.
Yes, lead lines to escape those
So
zombies.
that's right. That's
Yeah.
The sound design was actually very subtle, but really, really well done. I don't know whether you noticed, but in the last scene, or a good part of the last section of the movie, they stripped out all the sound, and you couldn't hear any birds, you couldn't hear any wind, and it was very intimate, and you could only hear the sounds of the people and the dialogue and breathing and just very simple Foley. And I guess that really did represent, I mean, obviously it represented this huge planet coming towards Earth and affecting the wildlife and the gravitational everything, atmosphere. They had trouble breathing. But it also kind of, I felt like it, again, represented depression, and how when you are depressed, everything just seems very bland and very uninspiring, and nothing sounds rich and full of life. It just sounds dead and dull. And also with the color grade as well, everything did look quite grey. But yeah, I thought it was very well done.
Yeah. The silence, the lack of noise, it's almost like a black hole almost, in its sound.
Exactly.
And building to this massive thing. Which almost seemed to make Justine calm down. And it made Claire freak out.
Yes, exactly. I think about, because we've covered a few kind of Italian giallo type movies. Those are always ADR'd and all Foleyed in post-production. So it sounds very awkward and unnerving. They almost did exactly the same thing with this film, but with a very effective result that did make you feel a bit like on edge, like what is going on? Why is this doesn't sound natural? And then,
Yes.
Yeah, I also like that in terms of sound. I really love that part where we first see Melancholia rise over the lake and all the birds come out.
Yes.
I love that.
That's a
Yes.
nice touch.
We had a solar eclipse not too long ago, and I was up with my parents up in the west coast of British Columbia, and we only got the partial eclipse, but it was pretty full. And as the moon passes in front of the sun, all the wildlife goes silent. But the opposite was true with this, where Melancholia is rising and you hear the birds like it's the first thing in the morning, and of course it's like midnight or whatever. That I loved that part of the sound as well. I thought that was great. There's so much in this movie. It's science fiction in a way, but there's so much realism in it as well. The realism in the depression, the realism in the even, you could argue this is like the worst wedding reception ever, but in some senses it's so incredibly realistic because it's almost like it's dissected. All the fun bits have been removed, and we're focusing on kind of the cancer of the celebration.
It's all very theatrical and like you said, Conrad, as well, like a farce. Like it really is this almost unnatural but still realistic event that's taking place, and I kind of feel it's quite reflected in the music as well, because the music is taken from an opera, Tristan and Isolde by Wagner, and it has that very dramatic, operatic kind of feel to the whole movie, and it's lots of striking symbolism and visuals. And yeah, there are lots of references as well to painting. So the painting of Ophelia, there's that scene at the start where it shows Justine floating down this river in her wedding dress, and that's like the painting of Ophelia. The character of Ophelia, who drowns in this river. So I guess the river is symbolic of this depression that's just dragging her down.
Right.
Yeah, just a lot of details in the movie that you can really take apart and think about.
Just fascinating. I mean, I can't imagine how this man's mind works.
Yeah, he's definitely one of the most fascinating filmmakers working today. And even people have a very polarized response to everything that
very,
he does.
very polarized.
Even in something like this, you can't help but get the sense that he may well be making fun of us. It looks as though it's deeply serious, but it could all just be a prank. I mean, one thing that I did notice was Justine's mocking of her sister's attempt to make a perfect moment for the end. That she says, oh, let's sit on the veranda with a glass of wine all together. Will you do that for me, sis? I just want it to be nice. And she says to her, well, maybe we could play Beethoven's Ninth, which is the Ode to Joy, and just mocks her for it viciously. But at the same time, you think, yes, but hang on, Lars, you're showing us these cosmic images with Wagner over the top of them. So are you mocking us at the same time? Because this is the kind of imagery and music that we expect for this kind of event. So
You're right.
You almost feel as though it's a prank.
Yeah, you're right. If they had sat on the veranda with a glass of wine playing Beethoven, it would have actually fit in just fine with the movie. But what was interesting about it, it was like Justine chose to make it about the boy. It wasn't about her at all. And in the end, she's the hero. I mean, she makes the child feel okay about the end of the world. And that's incredibly unselfish.
Yeah, and I think that it's why he is in the center of that triptych that you see so early on in the film, that he is kind of this balancing figure between these two very different women, or these two halves of the same woman. Yeah.
Coming to you live from the Movie Oubliette Theatre, it's the prestigious Mobley Awards.
Okay, so it's time for a break, and it's just the boys here, and we're going to be nominating some of our favourite aspects of the movie in the most frivolous categories imaginable. As always, we kick off with favourite quote. Lots of wonderful quotes in this movie. Dan, did you have a particular favourite?
Yeah, I mean, I really liked a lot of the quotes that Justine said. She was very, very poetic and very romantic. So it's in the second part, and Justine is talking to Claire, and they're talking about the approaching planet about to hit Earth. And I think Claire is talking about, what are we going to do? How can we avoid this? And then Justine says, the earth is evil. We don't need to grieve for it. Nobody will miss it. And it's just a very, almost like defeatist, but at the same time romantic, saying that we're really not that important. When a big planet is hurtling towards the Earth, it doesn't really matter. What can you do?
Yeah, there's lots of opportunities for big portentous speeches like that in this movie. And particularly because the planet is called Melancholia, it means that while they're talking about the planet, they could be meaning something else. And my favourite quote is John, who's so enthusiastic, Kiefer Sutherland, about this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see the planet nearly being destroyed. And he says, Melancholia is just going to pass right in front of us, and it's going to be the most beautiful sight ever.
Oh.
So, yes. And I just think it's so ironic that he should feel that way about something that, if you take it another way, means terrible, soul-crushing depression.
Very good.
So, did you have a favourite scene? Mine would be the opening montage, which is probably an easy pick. But
Yeah, I mean, obviously very stunning visually. I actually quite liked that final scene with the fact that it was very grey and very dull. And the sound design is very sparse, and then you have that very gentle kind of rumbling sound of the planet approaching, and then it's just this huge wave of noise comes at you, and then the screen just goes white. Yeah, the most powerful scene obviously in the film. But I really enjoyed it.
yeah, and it cuts to the longest period of black screen and silence before
Yes.
the credits begin.
Yes.
So that you're left in your own little void
Yeah.
to contemplate your fate
Yeah.
for quite some time.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's very powerful stuff.
So what was your favorite scene? The opening?
Yeah, I think it is the opening montage.
Yeah.
I saw somebody commenting online that it's very much like bringing paintings to life.
Yes.
Because the paintings always do not capture a freeze frame moment in time, but give a sense of movement. And so
yeah.
you sort of see that movement as a trick of the eye. Yeah, I just love that. It's amazing
Oh,
stuff.
I mean, in the respect as well that the movie constantly references other famous paintings as well. So in itself that the movie is like a painting is, yeah,
Incredible.
very well done.
Yeah.
Very well done.
In terms of special effects, did you have a favorite effect in this movie?
I really liked how they conveyed the planet. It was done really well. Like, it didn't look over the top. It just had this kind of ominous background kind of effect. And it did look often like a giant moon. I thought they did that really well and it didn't look hammy. Like, I feel like if we watched this in 30 years, it would still hold up as a special effect, as a CGI effect. So, yeah, well done on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's perfect every time it appears. I mean, my favourite is one of the scenes on the lawn when Melancholia is approaching, but it's still quite some distance away. And so you have the moon and you have Melancholia, and they're about the same size.
Yes.
It casts two shadows on all of those beautiful shaped hedges on the lawn. And it's such an odd image. You immediately register that something's wrong.
Yep.
And when you watch the making of, you actually see how they did it, which is just two big cranes, two enormous lights
Oh, yes.
with different gels on,
Right.
and then it's replaced with computer graphics, but that's how they actually set the scene, and
Wow.
simple and very effective.
Cool.
Sound effect, did you have one of those?
Sound effect. I mean, the only thing I loved about the sound was, I guess, the lack of sound in the final scene and how it's very sparse and very empty and kind of symbolizes the emptiness of depression, but also the fact that this planet is enveloping the earth and the wildlife is affected by it and the weather and the atmosphere and everything. So, yeah, the lack of sound is my favorite sound.
Oh, for me it was the birds, when you have that
Ah, yes.
spectacular Melancholia rise, I suppose you would call it moonrise, Melancholia rise.
Yes.
The fact that the birds start singing, Catherine mentioned this, and I suddenly thought, yes, this is how it would be. This is really interesting.
Yes.
And did you have a funniest scene, appropriately or not?
Well, I think Catherine mentioned it. So the scene with Jack, so Justine's boss, when he throws a plate at the vending wagon, and it doesn't smash, and he just says, "Oh, I dropped my plate." And he picks it up and smashes it again. I felt like that was a very improv kind of moment. Like, I'm sure that wasn't expected.
No.
You expect all crockery and glasses to smash on first impact. So
Yes, you do. And it reminds me of The Haunting, where they
Yes.
drop the bottle and it doesn't break. Yeah, I love that.
what was your funniest moment?
Mine is the limo. I was creased up with that. The whole
yes.
thing. You go from these awe-inspiring depictions of the end of the world to people trying to get to their wedding reception in a ridiculous white stretched limo and being unable to negotiate a twisty country lane.
Yes.
And I thought, there's the movie. It's just so symbolic of the whole movie that this ridiculous show of wealth and it's not practically able to negotiate nature's landscape. I just thought,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, got it in one.
Yeah.
But I was wetting myself. I thought it was very funny.
I really like that scene as well because it did show Justine's character just seeing this whole event as just a hilarious waste of time, trying in this limo trying to drive up a windy dirt road when it was the most impractical thing possible. Yeah. And she's just cracking up in the back seat.
It is quite a funny movie, I think, considering the weighty themes that it's dealing with. I still found it very amusing.
Yeah.
Especially the wedding.
Yeah.
So that's our Mooblies.
Yes.
Let's get back to Catherine.
She's probably just been sitting alone by herself with her thoughts.
Contemplating the void.
So we are back with the final verdict. Should this film be released to run amok on an 18-hole golf course, or should it be cast down into a hole and collided with a planet and be lost forever? Catherine, you are our guest today. What did you think?
I think it should be allowed to run amok with a 19-hole golf course. But I think you need to be aware of what it is you're getting yourself into. It's unusual, and you need to have a very, very open mind. And I would say watch it more than once.
Yes.
Like 13 or 14 times might be sufficient. I'm not sure. But I think it's a fascinating film from a very unique genre that I would almost call a genre of its own, by a very interesting writer and director who has been always very controversial, and that's what sort of makes it kind of fascinating.
Yes.
I do agree. I myself gravitate to tragedies. I love dramas that end in sad endings. For some reason, I like things falling apart. I like watching movies where marriages fall apart or families have feuds. It's something cathartic about it. I guess it brings back to tragedies from Greece and Shakespeare. So I did feel like this was quite a Shakespearean operatic piece of cinema, and yeah, I loved all aspects of it. The acting was superb, the score and sound design was amazing, and yes, visually a feast for the eyes. Yes, I will release it any day.
Well, I think it's unanimous because I agree with both of you. I'd never seen this film before. I had seen Antichrist, and I wasn't all that taken with it, to be honest. But this, I think if you're going to watch a Lars von Trier movie, I think this is not a bad place to start. I think this is a good entry into his dark and disturbing world, because it is a very romantic and beautiful exploration of depression. It's a fascinating character study of these two incredible women who may or may not be the same woman. And it's deeply moving, but at the same time, it fits into that genre of science fiction, the cosmic philosophical exploration of our place in the universe.
Existential, yes.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and I'd love that. I'd lap that stuff like Solaris and so on. So I think it's visually stunning. It's beautifully performed. And as you say, even though it's 2 hours and 15 minutes long, I couldn't get enough of it. I watched it twice in very quick succession in preparation for this discussion, and I still want to go back because I keep thinking about it. So
And there's so much more to discover every time you watch it. There's so many little details that come out that are hugely effective on the story, but you could miss them, the first or second time you watch it. Yeah, I agree with you, Dan. I love kind of intimate, personal, psychological explorations of people. I seem to really, I love this kind of exploration. And it's not only, exploration of the universe and very philosophical, but it's exploration of the human psyche and how we react to different things, to different people, to different situations. It's almost, I feel like the bulk of the movie is about that. And this is almost like a consequence and now after we've explored all this in detail, it's over. Boom. Forever. You're not coming back. Yeah, I find it really fascinating. on so many different levels.
Yes.
Conrad, I did find a lot of similarities between this movie and The Haunting as well, which also centers on a female character dealing with her inner demons and in the end sort of embracing it and giving into her darkness, I guess. And also in that film, a lot of the male characters are quite domineering. So interesting.
Domineering, but ineffectually so. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Which is sort of the way this one was as well, you know. Ultimately, the weakest character is the strongest character.
Indeed.
Yes.
Fascinating.
It is.
Yes.
We should do this again. Like, we'll all watch it 4 or 5 more times, and we could have another 3-hour conversation about it, and it'll all be different.
Yeah. Okay, a year from now, it's a date.
Okay, let's do it. I love it. We could have like a yearly Melancholia revisit. I'm into it.
Okay.
All right.
So
Set it free.
let's set it free.
Set it free to the universe.
The earth is evil. Bye.
So, Catherine, you've been an amazing guest. I'm sure everyone out there has had as much fun listening to you talking about this movie as we have talking about it with you. And I'm sure they'll be thrilled to hear about what's coming up next for you. What's on the horizon for Catherine Mary Stewart?
Well, I'm still acting. I'm doing some voiceover work. Most recently, I've been writing. I'm working on a movie to direct right now that I'm very excited about. I recently directed a short film that I also wrote. I want to get into directing more, of course. I'm an actress. What do you want to do with your career? I want to direct. That's what they all say, apparently. But I really do. So I did write a full script a while ago, which I need to get back to at some point. And since then, I've been working on another pilot script with a friend of mine that I'm very excited about. It's very contemporary and meaningful in this time. And also writing a movie with a partner about sort of a mother-daughter relationship. So I'm excited for the future. Like in the next year or so, I'm also trying to direct a play, get a play going here in New York. I'm living in New York. So that's also a new challenge for me. Yeah. So I'm busy.
That's a lot of projects.
Yeah, it's a lot of projects.
Wow.
I just hope a planet doesn't slam in before I can direct my first play.
Oh, well, at least we'll all be well prepared.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. I'll be pissed off, frankly. I'll be like, oh, come on. Yeah, so.
Not before the last Starfighter sequel comes out.
I know. Where I can play the second last Starfighter's mom.
Yes. And hopefully have a repeat of that wonderful moment where you turn to the camera with the wind blowing through your hair and say,
Yes.
I love you, Alex Rogan.
I could say, I love you, Alex Rogan Jr.
Yes. So, if people would like to follow your exploits online, how would they do that?
They would go to Facebook. I'm mostly on Facebook at Catherine Mary Stewart. I'm also on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. And those are, I guess, the 3.
Great. And if you'd like to follow us, we are Movie Oubliette on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And if you're not sure how to spell Oubliette, it is...
Oubliette.
Sorry, I couldn't hear that over the impending apocalypse. What was that?
Oubliette.
And don't forget to rate and review us on iTunes or whichever podcast platform you're using to consume our thoughts on forgotten movies, because we would love to hear from you.
Yeah, I mean, how else can people know how amazing we are?
Indeed, yeah. They're clueless. Help them out.
And let us know if you agree with our thoughts on Melancholia or any suggestions you have for future films that we should cover in our next episodes.
Indeed, yes.
But hang on, what are we doing next episode?
Yeah, good question. It's going to be an interesting one because it's actually the newest film that we've ever looked at, but it's still obscure. It is... Space Station 76.
What? I've never heard of that movie. Tell me more.
No. 2014 science fiction dark comedy drama directed by Jack Plotnick. It was based on a play and it's got an incredible cast. It's got Patrick Wilson, Liv Tyler, Matt Bomer, and Jerry O'Connell. Yeah, pretty impressive lineup.
And I still haven't heard of this movie. It must be really bad.
No. Yeah, it's got a very limited release and it's available on VOD. But this one was chosen by our special guest.
Oh, another special guest.
I'm sure they won't be as good as Catherine.
No. She's definitely our best.
She's definitely up best. Okay, so yes, that should be fun.
Looking forward to it.
So all that's left for me to say is thanks to everyone for listening and a special thanks to Catherine Mary Stewart for being our guest today. You've been amazing.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Such a pleasure.
I had the best time. We talked about the darkest movie on the planet Earth, and it was so much fun.
It's always great to talk about depression.
Indeed.
Makes you feel so much better.
It does. So thanks again and catch us next time.
Bye.
Bye for now.
Bye.
We review the films others tend to forget. Come with us and open up the movie Oubliette.
For fuck's sake, if people want to linger in the bath, stay at home.